People say grief changes you. What they don't mention is how it can change others too, turning familiar faces into strangers wearing the masks of people you once loved. I learned this painful lesson 3 months after losing my wife Sarah, when her parents tried to claim our home as their own. I'm Marcus Thompson, 41, a software engineer who met the love of his life in college and spent 18 years building a life with her before cancer took her away. Sarah was a force of nature, brilliant, kind, and somehow always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Even in her final days, she was planning, preparing, protecting. "Promise me you'll keep the house," she'd insisted during one of her last lucid moments, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "No matter what happens, what anyone says or claims. Promise me." I promised, of course. This house was our dream, the Victorian we'd restored together over 10 years of weekends and evenings. Every squeaky floorboard and intricate molding held memories of us, of the life we'd built. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. The first sign that something was wrong came at the memorial service. Sarah's parents, Robert and Helen Bradley, had always been distant, more focused on their social standing in Philadelphia's elite circles than their only daughter's happiness. But that day, they seemed different. More attentive, almost predatory. "You must be overwhelmed maintaining such a large house by yourself," Helen had said, her perfectly manicured hand resting on my arm. "Perhaps it's time to consider other arrangements." I brushed it off as awkward attempts at comfort, until they showed up at my door 3 months later, their lawyer in tow. "We have something to discuss," Robert announced, barely waiting for me to invite them in. They settled into our living room, Sarah's carefully chosen furniture, her favorite throw pillows still arranged exactly as she'd left them, like they owned the place. In a way, according to the documents their lawyers spread across our coffee table, they thought they did. These papers show that the initial down payment for this house came from Bradley family funds. Their lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Harrison, explained. Furthermore, the renovation money was provided through a family trust, making the Bradleys significant stakeholders in this property. I stared at the documents, my mind struggling to process what I was hearing. "That's impossible. Sarah and I'd bought this house with our own savings. The renovations came from my tech stock options and her consulting work." Helen's laugh was like breaking glass. "Oh, Marcus, did you really think 2 young professionals could afford a house like this in this neighborhood?" Sarah knew better than to tell you, of course. She understood the importance of maintaining appearances. "We allowed this arrangement while Sarah was alive," Robert added, his voice heavy with false sympathy. "But now that she's gone, it's time for the property to return to the Bradley family." My head was spinning. Sarah and I had shared everything. Our dreams, our fears, our finances. She wouldn't have kept something like this from me, would she? "I don't believe you," I said, finally gathering the scattered papers and handing them back. "This house belongs to Sarah and me. The deed is in our names." "Ah, yes, the deed." Harrison pulled out another document. "You'll find there's a trust provision that supersedes the surface ownership. You have 30 days to vacate or will be forced to take legal action." They left me sitting there, surrounded by the life Sarah and I had built, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. But something about their claims didn't add up. Sarah had been meticulous about our finances, keeping detailed records of every transaction. If family money had been involved in our house purchase, there would be a paper trail. I spent the next week going through our files, both physical and digital. Sarah had been organized to the point of obsession, especially after her diagnosis. Every document was carefully labeled and stored, every password noted in her encrypted password manager. But it was in her study, late one night, that I found something odd. Behind her favorite Georgia O'Keeffe print was a small wall safe I'd never seen before. The combination was our wedding date, typical Sarah, sentimental even in her security measures. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. "My darling Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and my parents have made their move." I knew they would. They've been waiting for years, thinking I didn't know what they were planning. Watch the video on this drive. It will explain everything. Remember your promise about the house. Trust me one last time. All my love, Sarah. My hands shook as I plugged the drive into my laptop. Sarah's face filled the screen, thin and pale from her treatments, but her eyes still bright with that fierce intelligence I've fallen in love with 2 decades ago. "Hello, my love," she began. "If you're watching this, then Robert and Helen have finally shown their true colors. They're trying to claim our house, aren't they? With some elaborate story about family money and secret trusts. I paused the video, my heart pounding. Even now, even gone, she was still protecting me, still 3 steps ahead. But what she revealed next would shake everything I thought I knew about the Bradleys, about our house, and about the real reason Sarah had made me promise to never let it go. For what she discovered, hidden away in this very house, wasn't just evidence to protect our home. It was proof of something much darker, a secret the Bradley family had been hiding for decades. And Sarah, brilliant, meticulous Sarah, had found it all. I unpaused the video and Sarah's voice filled the study we'd shared for so many years. What my parents won't tell you, what they've been desperate to hide, is that this house belonged to my grandmother, Eleanor Bradley. She lived here for 40 years, running a successful investment firm from the ground floor office while raising my father. But more importantly, she helped other women invest and build their own wealth, in a time when women weren't supposed to handle their own money. Sarah paused, taking a shaky breath. In 1985, my grandmother discovered that my father had been embezzling from his clients, using their investments to cover his gambling debts. She threatened to report him, to make everything public. A week later, she died in what was ruled an accidental fall down the main staircase. My blood ran cold. I looked toward our front hall, where that same grand staircase curved elegantly down to the foyer. I was only 5 when she died, Sarah continued. But I never believed it was an accident. Neither did a lot of other people, including her former assistant, Margaret Wells. She tried to investigate, but my father used his connections to shut her down. The house was sold, the firm was closed, and all the records were supposedly destroyed. Sarah's face grew more intense. Except they weren't. Remember all those weekends we spent restoring the house? All those hours I insisted on doing the office renovations myself. I found something behind the old wood paneling, a hidden compartment containing my grandmother's real financial records, her personal journals and letters from Margaret Wells documenting everything. She reached off-screen and held up a thick folder. The evidence is all here, Marcus. Proof of my father's embezzlement, proof that he knew his victims would be meeting with my grandmother that night, proof that he was in the house when she died. But more than that, proof that this house never belonged to the Bradley family trust. My grandmother left it to me directly, in a will that was suppressed after her death. I paused the video again, my mind reeling. Sarah had carried this knowledge for years, knowing her father was not just a thief but potentially a murderer. The papers are in a compartment under the office floorboards, she continued when I pressed play. 3rd board from the window, marked with a small cross. There's also a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Key is in this safe, containing copies of everything, including a letter to be delivered to the district attorney if anything suspicious happens to you. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you this while I was alive. I wanted to protect you from this darkness, but I always knew they'd try to take the house after I was gone. They think the evidence died with my grandmother and later with Margaret Wells. They don't know I found it all. I spent the next hour pulling up the floorboard she indicated. Everything was there, exactly as she described. Financial records, journals, letters, and most damning of all, Eleanor Bradley's real will, leaving the house directly to Sarah on her 30th birthday. The next morning, I called Benjamin Foster, a criminal attorney recommended in Sarah's files. He reviewed everything, his expression growing grimmer with each document. This is explosive, he said finally. The statute of limitations has expired on the embezzlement, but for the murder. He looked up at me. There is no statute of limitations on murder, Mr. Thompson. And this evidence, while circumstantial, is compelling. I don't care about pressing charges, I said honestly. I just want to keep my home. Oh, we'll do more than that, Foster smiled grimly. We're going to make sure the Bradleys never bother you again. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon. Robert and Helen arrived with their lawyer, looking smugly confident until they saw Benjamin Foster sitting at my dining room table. What's he doing here? Robert demanded, recognizing the city's most prominent criminal attorney. Helping me understand some interesting family history, I said calmly. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss. We have nothing to discuss, Helen snapped. Either you agree to vacate the property, or you'll what? I opened the folder in front of me. Try to enforce a fake trust document, or maybe you prefer to discuss what really happened to Eleanor Bradley on these stairs in 1985. The color drained from Robert's face. Helen gripped the back of her chair so hard her knuckles went white. "What are you talking about?" Their lawyer looked between them, confused. "Show them," I said to Foster. One by one, he laid out the documents, the financial records showing Robert's embezzlement, the letters from Margaret Wells, Eleanor's real will. With each new piece of evidence, the Bradleys seemed to physically shrink. "This is absurd," Robert tried to bluster, but his voice shook. "These documents are fake. Like the trust documents you brought me," I countered. "Everything here has been authenticated. Your mother's handwriting, Margaret Wells' signature, even the paper and ink dating to 1985. The only fake documents in this room are the ones you brought to try to steal my home." "The district attorney would be very interested in this evidence," Foster added mildly. "As with the families of the women your father stole from, Mr. Bradley. Some of them are still alive, still wondering what happened to their investments." Helen started to cry, but they were the tears of a woman who'd been caught, not one who felt genuine remorse. "What do you want?" Robert asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Three things," I said, pulling out a document Foster had prepared. "First, you sign this paper acknowledging that you have no claim to this house and will never make any future claims. Second, you will never contact me again. And third," I leaned forward, thinking of Sarah, of her grandmother, of all the lives Robert Bradley had damaged with his greed. "You will set up a scholarship fund in Eleanor Bradley's name at the Women's Business School, endowed with enough money to support 10 full scholarships per year. That would cost millions," Helen protested. "Consider it restitution," Foster suggested, "and a bargain compared to what might happen if this evidence became public." They signed everything within the hour. After they left, I sat in Eleanor Bradley's old office, my office now, looking at the evidence of so much pain and betrayal. Part of me wanted to turn it all over to the police, to see justice done for Eleanor and all the women Robert had stolen from. But I understood why Sarah had held onto it instead. This wasn't just about justice, it was about protection. Protection of our home, of Eleanor's legacy, of the future Sarah had wanted to preserve. I gathered all the documents, making multiple copies. Some went into our safe, some to Foster's office, some to the safety deposit box. The originals I kept in Eleanor's hidden compartment, sealing them back under the floorboards where Sarah had found them. That night, I watched the rest of Sarah's video. The last part was different, not evidence or explanations, just her, talking to me as she had so many times in this room. "I know this is a lot to process," she said softly, "and I know you're probably angry that I kept this from you. But I needed you to be genuinely shocked when they made their move. Your honest reaction protected you." She smiled, that brilliant, loving smile that had lit up my life for 18 years. "Make this house live again, Marcus. Fill it with love and honesty and light. That's what my grandmother wanted. It's what I want too." A year has passed since that confrontation. The Bradley Scholarship Fund has already helped 8 women start their business degrees. I've never heard from Robert or Helen again. The house feels different now, not just filled with memories of Sarah, but with a deeper history. I've done research on Eleanor Bradley, learning about the women she helped, the barriers she broke. Her portrait now hangs in the office, beside Sarah's favorite O'Keeffe print. Last month, I started mentoring at the Women's Business School, teaching coding and tech entrepreneurship. It feels right, continuing Eleanor's legacy of helping women succeed in male-dominated fields. Sarah would have loved that. Yesterday, while giving the office a deep clean, I found another envelope tucked behind Eleanor's portrait. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before. Eleanor and Sarah when she was tiny, both laughing in this very room. On the back, in Sarah's handwriting. "The truth doesn't always bring justice, but it can bring protection. Love leaves clues if you know where to look. Keep looking, keep loving, keep living." I hung the photo beside Eleanor's portrait and Sarah's print, 3 generations of remarkable women who have lived and fought and protected within these walls. The house feels warmer somehow, knowing all its secrets are finally in the open, its legacy preserved. Sarah was right. Love does leave clues. In hidden compartments and secret videos, in scholarship funds and mentorship programs, in the quiet strength of women protecting each other across generations. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, it leaves us a home where truth and justice can finally, peacefully coexist.